these people in the news. We didn't interview those stories. And so once we came back and started editing, that's a real phone number, by the way. The number's actually 1-877. We misprinted in this copy, but when we put it out in theaters, it'll be right. 1-877 Osama 08. So if you got any clues, any tips, you see him walking around Salt Lake somewhere, call in, let us know. Could be anywhere. You know, he's like Bigfoot and Kaiser Soze combined. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. This gentleman. Yeah.
Do you know why you got such a negative reaction from those Orthodox Jews?
Yeah, it's a good question. Why do we get such a negative reaction? I think it was a few things. I think one, they have an incredible distaste of anybody in the media, anybody with a camera. They have kosher cell phones. You guys didn't know this? I'm here to laugh, but it's true. That don't have access to the internet, that don't have texting capabilities just so they can't be tempted by anything. So we represent kind of the devil in a lot of ways. And I think a lot of people got very offended that we were asking questions about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict while we were there. And it escalated very, very quickly. I mean, what you see happened over a period of probably about 30 to 40 minutes. I mean, it was fast as we were there talking to people. What I really love about that scene, what I think is incredibly beautiful and poignant, is the guy who comes up to me and makes it a point to say, what you see here, the majority of us don't think like them. You know, you're seeing an incredibly small amount of people, it's like 6 or a dozen, that really took this to a physical level very, very quickly. And I think it's representative of a lot of things we start to see as we travel around the whole world. Someone else? Yes, sir.
Which country did you feel the least safe?
Which country did I feel the least safe? Probably Afghanistan. Pakistan is a beautiful country. We felt in danger there a lot of times. When we would get out of the car, like what you see here where it got violent and we were, after about a half hour, when we hit the ground in Afghanistan and Pakistan, we were never really in one place for longer than about 10 minutes. You know, once we would be in a market or we'd be talking to people, we hired a producer named James Bravazon and a security advisor who also came with us. And you know, these guys, one was an SAS, one is a frontline field reporter. You know, he basically works for the BBC and Channel 4, and that guy loves to go where people are shooting bullets. That's his thing. And so his whole goal, we hired him just to make sure that we could get into some pretty hairy areas, some pretty scary places, and get out. You know, that was both these guys' jobs. And so when we were in Afghanistan, I'd say the scariest place for me was once we got embedded with the troops in Afghanistan, because these guys work so hard and are trying to do so much of the right thing and doing their job, but they are targeted every single day. You know, these guys are targeted by the Taliban, they're targeted by IEDs. You know, you saw the ambush that happened. The week before we got to the base, there was a rocket attack on the FOB that we went to, where basically just a rocket was fired into the base and exploded. You know, nobody got hurt, but you know, it was pretty harrowing. Yes, sir.
I'm impressed with some of the access you had to the women down there. I understand they don't even like to have them photographed in burqas, and they're not allowed to read. And,
yeah, I mean, it was that was one of the things that you know, when we were in Saudi Arabia, especially, you know, where we got access to so many of the girls there. We had some great interviews with women that we'll end up probably putting on the DVD. But it was just this, we had some great real conversations, and there's this great underground scene in Saudi Arabia as well, where the kids play rock music and they go to underground parties, and I mean, there is this thread that I think very much is like an American thread that we have here. But once we started getting, you have to make really hard choices when you edit a film, and for us, it was just another tangent in that country that I felt we just didn't need to get into. Yes, ma'am.
What was the decision made to not continue pursuing them? Was that something that was kind of intended from the beginning?
No, I mean, well, from the beginning, the plan was to try and go into the tribal regions to get as close as we could. And, you know, from where we were, you know, guesstimating, we were probably, from what people were saying, within 50 to 100 meters or 100 miles, somewhere within that range to where he was. But the week before we got into Pakistan, there was a madrasa that was blown up in the Bejor province, and about 80 people were killed. And at first they said we saw a U.S. helicopter, we saw the U.S. military blow it up. Then Bashar said, no, it was us, we did it. There were Al-Qaeda militants in there. It was an Al-Qaeda trading ground, so that's why we took it out. And the anti-Western, anti-journalist sentiment everywhere in that region was incredible. I mean, even Pakistani journalists were like, dude, we're not going in there, you can't go in. So we basically made the decision not to go in at that point. Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk about where the idea came from and why you decided to frame the movie with the video game vignettes?
Sure. I got the idea for the film in 2005. We had just finished the first season of our FX TV show, 30 Days, and we're starting to try and figure out what the next movie would be. Super Size Me was a film that played in about, I think it was 75 countries worldwide when it finally hits maximum release. And you know, I wanted to try and figure out a film that was going to deal with, you know, things on a global level that weren't just going to be, you American-centric. And we were in the second term of the Bush administration, and like suddenly, I don't know if Osama released a tape or an album or something, but suddenly he was back in the news again. And everybody's like, why haven't we found him? You know, where is he? This guy has to be brought to justice. Where in the world is Osama Bin Laden? And I was like, that's a great question. That sounds like a great movie. Let's go do that. And I said to Jeremy, I said, let's make that film. And he said, you're an idiot. I said, well, let's look at it. So that was kind of when we started. And sorry, a little harsh. You gotta hide it when you're here. With the video games, you know, why we decided to incorporate those in as kind of like transitional elements and use to tell a story. You know, I'm a child of the video game revolution. I was born in, you know, the 70s, grew up in the 80s when the Atari 2600 came out, and the Intellivision, and then the ColecoVision, and then I had an Atari 5200, and then I had a Nintendo, and then I had a Nintendo ES, and then I had a Sega, and then I had an Xbox, and then I had an Xbox 360, and then I had a PlayStation 1, 2, and 3. You know, I'm a bit of a 2-year-old at times. But for me, it was trying to create something where we could continue to bridge a gap between an older audience and a younger audience to really create still a multi-generational experience. You know, and kids who've seen this have already loved it. And a 55-year-old guy who saw the film, the opening night came up to me and said, "This movie says everything I wanted to hear for the last 4 years." So I mean, I think it does a good job of, you know, creating something for everybody. Yes, sir.
Across the board, I know traveled to a lot of countries, and kind of the movie set up as an American versus Islamic kind of perspective. What was and as a British soldier, what was the perspective you found traveling in Europe and more westernized parts of the world while doing the film?
Yeah, I mean, there were some great interviews. Like, there's so many places we shot that didn't even make the film.